I'm Sonya Rooney, the University Archivist here at Washington University in St. Louis. We are a medium-sized independent university and one of the world's leaders in academics, research, and patient care. We have 14,000 students, undergraduate and graduate. We have 7 schools, including arts and sciences, art and architecture, business, engineering, law, medicine, and social work and public health. We are in Olin Libraries, which is the main library on campus. There are also 9 other libraries on campus and 2 at 2 additional campuses. The university libraries are a great resource for the faculty and students here. We have literally over millions of books and electronic books and journals that are accessed on a daily basis. For instance, Washington University has the 3rd largest collection of books previously owned by Thomas Jefferson. University Archives, the unit that I lead, it houses over 300 unique collections that document the history of the university as well as St. Louis from 1853 to today. The collections that we have include the Chancellor's files, faculty papers, photographs of campus, campus publications, student group material, and also St. Louis material, including politics, social welfare, business, and architecture. The collection we're going to explore further today is the William Greenleaf Eliot personal papers. He was the co-founder of the university, and we have a rich material that we'd like to show you today. To start out with, we have in the collection photographs of his house and his office. This was located at 2660 Washington Avenue, and this was where he was living near the end of his life. He was born in 1811 in Massachusetts. He came to St. Louis from eastern United States in 1834 as the first Unitarian minister west of the Mississippi. His progeny includes his grandson, the famed T.S. Eliot. But in his day, William Greenleaf Eliot's interaction with St. Louis and Washington University were intertwined, and his impact carries through to today. So he was not only a Unitarian minister, but he served as WashU Chancellor from 1870 to 1887, and also served on the Board of Trustees for a number of years. He helped found the Western Sanitary Commission, which was a relief effort during the Civil War. He worked for abolition of slavery. He worked for education for public schools and higher education. He was involved in working for women's rights, both education, voting, and equality. He was a temperance advocate and worked for prison reform. This is one of the 10 diaries that we have for Eliot, and this page presents a day in the life of Eliot. It says, "My present course of life must be 1. Any special morning work at home or abroad that needs to be done before 9. 9 to 10 a.m., university and metaphysics. 10 to 10:30, mission house, which comes under my care again. 10:30 to 1:30, sanitary commission office and hospital work in general. 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock p.m., parochial care and hospital work. 7 to 8 p.m., read Metaphysics to Tom, which is his son. 8 to 11 p.m., letters and other writings, and also preparations for Sunday's sermons." The other aspect we'd like to talk about from his collection is he has some things directly related to the university. This item here is from the inauguration of the university from April 1857. Even though the university was founded in 1853, the inauguration happened in 1857. So this is just a printed inauguration program, and it includes introductory remarks by Eliot, who was the president of the board at that time. And his introductory remarks start, "Fellow citizens, with a degree of pleasure which I cannot adequately express, and with feelings of profound gratitude to him without whose blessings none can thrive, I welcome you here this day to take part in the inaugural exercises of Washington University. The work is indeed only begun, but the few steps of assured progress already taken justify us in large hopes for the future." So that's just the beginning of his introductory remarks. Another item from the university is a draft of his commencement speech in 1862, which was actually the first graduating class. So their handwritten draft by him, it says Eliot Commencement 1862. And in it he talks about truth and human reasoning. He also explores the work of Kant and various scientists over time. Even though this was in 1862 during the Civil War, he doesn't mention the war at all. He did mention the war and his fight for the Union in his sermons and other things, but left it out of this commencement address. So you can see it's a number of pages. There's various edits. And then on the back page, it lists the class members that graduated that year. And Thomas Lamb Eliot was one of Eliot's sons. We're going to move on and look at Eliot's work with women in education. So he not only worked for higher education, but also the general education of women. He gave a series of lectures about women in his church services, and they were later published in this book. And it's called Lectures to Young Women. He gave the lectures in the winter of 1852 to 53, and then it was published in 1854. So we'll look at the table of contents, and he's talking about the home, duties, education, and follies, and women's missions. I'd like to look at the chapter on education. And read just a few lines. My subject tonight is female education. We have hereto spoken to of the different relations in which woman is placed, and of the influence she unavoidably exerts. As society becomes more refined, her influence increases, and the question therefore becomes more important. How shall her education be so conducted as to make it good? And then he goes on to explore that. Later in 1890, they republished the book and added a few changes, especially to the beginning of it. It's now called Home Life and Influence, but it had a great impact, so they were able to reprint it later. Moving on, we'll look at Eliot and the Civil War. So this is a box of correspondence, and one of the letters that he wrote was to his son Tom. This is from August 22nd, 1862. And he's writing about general matters and then goes on. There was a big war meeting last night with big talk. And perhaps something will come of it. Nothing but victory in Virginia will straighten us here. And it's signed Father, who is William Greenleaf Eliot. So we have a lot of correspondence in the collection too, and this is just one example of the letters that relate to the Civil War. He also gave sermons related to the Civil War, and one of them was, we have a copy of it here. It's called The Higher Law Doctrine, North and South, a discourse delivered in St. Louis, Missouri, January 27, 1861, by Reverend W.G. Eliot. And he just goes through and talks about how he feels like the Union is right and that we should preserve that at all costs. Because of the Civil War, and he saw the conditions of the soldiers and the health care that they received, he worked to help found the Western Division of the Western Sanitary Commission. Again, this is one of his diaries, and it talks here about a draft of a letter. It's Sanitary Commission for the Department of the West. And it spells out like the letter that he wrote asking the main Sanitary Commission to start this individual unit out here in the West so that there was more resources and they could be more directly involved so the soldiers would have better care, especially when they were wounded. And this goes on for several pages. And then there's also a printed copy of the item that made this happen. So it did go through, and then Eliot was very involved with that Western Sanitary Commission. Another thing related to the Civil War that Eliot did was related to slavery. And so even very early on, he thought that the slaves should be free. And one way he worked about doing this was paying for slaves and then setting them free. So we have a bond of indemnity here from 1850, and it's where he purchased a slave for $600. And then this is April 15th, 1850, signed by Eliot. And it says, "Be it known to whom it may concern that under the above transfer, the said Lydia is of and shall become my property, that I do hereby declare her free from all bondage, and in case of my death, I desire my executors to perfect her freedom by paying all damages to whoever it may concern with my estate." So that was just one example. And then again, back to one of his diaries. This is from May 22nd, 1860. And it says, "Having spent a great part of the day in getting Sarah Green out of Lynch's slave yard, where a villain named Samuel Wilson had kept her for 6 weeks, paid him $950, and sent her home to her father and mother, Alec and Edith Green, who will gradually pay for her. Charles Millen given security by this day. What a blessing slavery is, he writes. Eliot also had a slave that ended up working for him. He didn't know that he was still bound to another slave owner. His name was Archer Alexander. And so he worked for Eliot for a while, and then he had to go back to his master, but eventually he was set free. And Eliot wrote a book about this life. So we have the book here, The Story of Archer Alexander by Eliot, published in 1885. And on this page you'll see this is a statue built as a memorial to President Lincoln, and a freed slave here at the bottom. If you'll notice the slave's face and then look at the pictures of Archer Alexander, the artist used his pictures to create this image of the slave. Now, Eliot had gone to see Thomas Ball, who was the artist of this monument, and it had another slave face in there, but he knew Archer and knew his story so well that he convinced the artist to put Archer's face on the statue. And this is a picture of it also. And the Kemper Art Museum here at the university has a marble small statue that has the other slave in it as one of the originals. So this is a great collection that we have in the archives, and it's used by multiple disciplines: American history, African American history, even politics, women and gender studies. And so it's a nice bridge for the two areas that we have in university archives with university history and St. Louis history.